Our guest today, J. Paul Getty, a man whose name you are certainly forgiven for not knowing. Mr. Getty prefers it that way. But he is the world's richest man, or at least has accumulated the greatest personal fortune of our time. He leads a strange, lonely, and curiously thrifty life. Douglas Leiterman found him in London during a brief stopover there, and 2 years after Close-Up's first invitation, persuaded him to grant his first television interview ever. The technical quality of this exclusive Close-Up film is not perfect. We hope we were right in thinking that this would not disturb you. Douglas Leiterman and his guest, J. Paul Getty, a man who had made his first $1 million before he was 24.
Grandeur. To keep my feet on the ground. He used to say that very often there are 3 generations from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. A business starts with the man in his shirt sleeves sitting at a pine wood desk and maybe sawdust on the floor. And that's the start of the business. And no matter how great and prosperous the business becomes, unless very careful guidance and attention is given to it, sooner or later, a generation comes along that's back in shirt sleeves at that pine wood desk.
Yeah? Well, I would guess that it must be a little difficult to avoid delusions of grandeur, as your father instructed you, when you're the world's richest man. How do you manage?
Well, I never think about money. If I'm thinking about commercial things, I think about business.
I believe, Mr. Getty, that Fortune magazine estimated your personal fortune at somewhere between $400 million and $900 million. What's your own estimate?
I think that Fortune, if I recall correctly, estimated that somewhere between 700 million and $1 billion.
I see. I'm a little low.
Well, compared with Fortune, yes.
Well, I suppose that it's been increasing pretty steadily from year to year.
Well, we always hope that business will grow.
Do you have any estimate yourself, Mr. Getty, of your net personal worth?
No, I've never made an estimate because I didn't see how it would help me in my business.
Mm-hmm. You know that if it were at the higher figure, it would be roughly equal to the total gold and dollar reserves of the sterling area. Does that interest you?
Well, I suppose it's interesting, but I don't think it has any practical importance so far as the sterling area is concerned, or so far as I'm concerned.
You have no intention of buying out the sterling area?
No.
I'm interested to know what it's like to be very wealthy. It must have special problems over those problems which afflict ordinarily wealthy men.
Well, I suppose it makes one a little more wary of strangers, because nearly always when one meets a stranger, pretty soon out comes a proposition.
What kind of a proposition?
Oh, to something to do with money, generally. Invest money, lend money, underwrite money, guarantee money, advise as to how money can be made. Which naturally is rather distressing.
You don't give advice on how money is to be made?
I don't feel qualified to give advice.
Well, you've done rather well yourself on the principles
I
on
think
which you
giving
wrote.
advice is a thankless task.
How about the other problems of wealthy men, like tipping, for instance? I suppose people expect you to give much more than anybody else.
Well, some of them do, but I try to give what other people give, about 15%.
What about, well, in Saudi Arabia, where you spend a good deal of your time, where there is a very large population of very poor people, and any one of whom you could probably double his year's income with a tip. Are you ever tempted to say to such a man, well, here's enough to keep you for 10 years, go off and enjoy it?
Well, I don't think that's a very logical or sensible way of giving away money. I think it would be gross discrimination in favor of one man against others. It's very hard to give money to individuals.
Is it?
And nearly all of the rich men that I've talked to never give money to individuals because it's impossible to do it.
You mean it's harmful to them, as a rule?
Well, no, it's one has so many applicants for financial assistance from all over the world, practically every state in the Union, and from 50 foreign countries, that it would require an organization probably 1,000 people in it, just to scattered over 50 countries, just to investigate the claims. One obviously can't send money blindly to everybody that asks for it. It isn't very fair to just send money to, say, 1 out of every 100 that applies for it. It makes a lottery out of it. And so it is impossible. There are just so many applicants. There's so many people in the world, individual people who have financial problems or think they have financial problems, that it's beyond the power of any one man to investigate the merits of their position, and no fortune in the world would be great enough to take care of them even for a few months.
Yes. You get letters, do you, from complete strangers asking for money?
Oh, yes, thousands of letters. Thousands. Tens of thousands.
Do you still read them?
Well, obviously, I couldn't read them all. I'd be reading 14 hours a day.
Well, I take it from what you said that you're careful with money, but some people have also said that you're stingy. Elsa Maxwell once said that she'd been at a party at which you refused to pick up the bill. How do you feel about things like that?
Well, I try to do things according to my own lights. It's difficult for a rich man to spend money because he's generally accused either of being stingy or splashing his money around.
He's damned either way.
Yes.
You don't consider yourself stingy, although you have been known to complain about the price of a breakfast at a Paris hotel.
Well, I imagine you have too.
They're very expensive. Are you interested, Mr. Getty, in the things that money can buy? The things that people normally expect rich men to spend money on.
Yes, not particularly in luxuries. I like clean things.
You don't go in for rich food and expensive clothes
No, I'm
and so on.
a steak and baked potato man. I don't care much for fancy food.
How many suits would you own, for instance?
Maybe half a dozen at a time.
You have, however, collected a number of homes and a couple hotels, haven't you?
Yes. Yes, I have a home in Saudi Arabia and one in Italy and one in England. But those are just places to stay when I'm in those countries. My permanent home is in Los Angeles, California.
The home that you acquired recently in England, one of England's most stately homes, I guess, is said to have 36 bedrooms.
I never counted them, but there are a lot of them.
Have you been in them all?
I don't claim to be in them all.
I'm interested to know why you decided to buy this stately home. You've lived most of your life in England in hotels, haven't you, like this one?
Well, that's just it. My associates and I wanted to get out of hotels.
Yes, there are nicer places in the world than hotel rooms to live in.
Yes, and very often we've had business conferences here. We've been in 3 or 4 different hotels scattered around town. It's often hard to get hotel accommodation.
Well,
so we're trying this. It's experiment. We'll see how it works.
you know,
Maybe we can think better out in the country.
I see. You know, you're very different from the usual conception of a rich tycoon. You're quiet, you're thoughtful, you don't even smoke cigars. Do people expect something different when they meet you?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to be like a certain man was described to me years ago. I asked his business manager, and I said, what do people think of Mr. X? And he said, well, I'll tell you. He said, they think he's extremely rich, extremely arrogant, and extremely stupid.
Well, you seem to have avoided all. What about your personal interests, Mr. Getty? I believe you've written several books. Do you read very much?
Yes, as much as I can find time for.
What kinds of things are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading a biography of Lord Northcliffe, 900 and some odd pages. Very interesting life, Lord Northcliffe.
Do you find any parallels between his career and yours?
Well, he was in journalism.
Yes, but the principles on which he built up his fortune, I mean.
Yes, he was an individualist in business. He was willing to take risks. And he made a success at a relatively early age.
I'd like to ask you a little further about your personal life. You've been married and divorced, what, 5 times now?
Yes, that's right.
Why have you been so unlucky in marriage, would you say?
Probably paid too much attention to my business.
Do you consider that it's difficult for a wealthy man to stay married?
Well, I suppose it's difficult for any man to stay married, but I think a wealthy man probably has extra difficulty that way.
You're not married now.
No.
Do you find, is it a problem? Do you have women chasing you? Do you have gold diggers after you? That sort of...
Oh, I don't suppose more than many others have, but I have no plans for future matrimony.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a philosophy of life, Mr. Getty? Do you ever wonder, for instance, why you should be very rich and somebody else very poor?
I have wondered sometimes about that. Wondered why some people who apparently have very good ability, work hard, and still never seem to make success of anything they do. And other people apparently less brilliant somehow seem to make success. Must be some factors there that are not too well recognized. Probably a sense of timing and a sense of proportion. Probably has something to do with it. Some people who are very brilliant, never able to distinguish the possible from the impossible. That's one thing. If a man is going to make success, he has to start with something that's possible for him to do. If he has an impossible objective, well, then he's not going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. And yet, in the case of both yourself and your father, you tackled the impossible. You drilled oil wells where other people thought there was no oil.
No, it wasn't impossible. It was difficult.
I see.
It's different. Trying to do the difficult and trying to do the impossible.
You don't agree with the man who said the impossible takes a little longer.
Yes.
Do you...
I think the impossible can't be done.
I see. Do you ever worry about the biblical proverb about the rich man in the kingdom of heaven?
Yes, I do. I think that rich man should bear that in mind.
Are you a religious person?
I'm a Methodist, and I believe in religion.
But you haven't worried about the proverb of the rich man enough to begin dispersing the Getty fortune.
Well, there's some other things about in the Bible too that indicate that the man who looks after his vineyard is worthy of some praise.
Yes. Do you find that you enjoy making money more than spending it?
Yes, I think so. I think a man that's too much interested in spending money never makes any.
That probably applies to most of us. How do you organize your daily routine? Do you work very hard?
Yes, I do. I generally manage to keep busy all day long.
You know,
about a 14-hour day.
You know, you're now past what's ordinarily considered retirement age.
Yes, I am.
You're not in any sense retired or even thinking about it.
No, and I'm actually working harder now than I was working 10 years ago.
Why is that, Mr. Getty?
Because I have more business now than I had then.
Do you ever look back on the days when you didn't have so much responsibility and wish maybe that you were back there?
Well, sometimes when I've had a particularly hard day, I think that way.
There was a time when you just operated one company, wasn't there?
Yes.
And ran everything yourself?
Yes, that's true. But I worked the hardest when I was starting in business. I used to work about 18, 19 hours a day then.
Well, you haven't cut down very much since then.
Well, I'm down to 14 now.
How do you feel about what seems to be a very low morality in Western business society now? Does this concern you?
I think it's deplorable. I think that the foundation of successful business, worthwhile business, is competence. The public and the customers should have confidence in the integrity of the business, of the businessman. That's really the principal commodity that a businessman has to offer, is honesty.
But the public seems to have lost a good deal of confidence in the businessman. How is this to be restored?
Well, there must be greater awareness of the importance of being ethical in business.
I'd like to go back to your oil interests. You had oil wells in America, and then you decided to take a look at the Middle East. Why was that?
Well, the Middle East, of course, is the center of the world's oil fields today, and has been for many years. The greatest fields are in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. You went into a particular area known as the neutral zone, where there was no oil at all.
There's no oil there, no.
And it's now producing how much?
It's producing about 130,000 barrels a day.
How much does that add up to? Would that supply a good-sized city for a year?
Well, that would supply Denmark, for example, has a consumption equivalent to about 85,000 barrels a day.
So you could supply all of Denmark's needs in another country the same size from that one oil lease,
well,
one leasing area.
Another country maybe half the size of Denmark.
I see. How much are you paying King Saud in royalties on that oil?
Well, the royalties are running at the present time about $1 million a month.
How do you feel about the way the king spends that money and a lot of other money that he gets from other oil leases?
Well, I think in general the money is wisely spent.
Even though he seems to live at a level of great opulence amidst a good deal of poverty among many of his subjects.
Well, he is the head of the government, and his scale of living, I think, corresponds to that of other heads of government.
Are you worried about our position with President Nasser of Egypt?
No, I don't think so. I think that President Nasser is a responsible man. He's the leader of Egypt. He's done a lot for Egypt.
You don't see him as another Hitler, a nationalist?
No, I don't at all.
This seems to be the general view of Great Britain and France, but not the view of the United States. Do you have any particular reason to believe that he is no danger to us in the Middle East?
Well, I don't think that Western nations need to be particularly afraid of their position in the Middle East if they keep out of politics if they're there strictly as business people, transacting business and rendering service as customers, that they're on firm footing there. Customers are generally popular.
I take it you would be very much opposed to the action of Britain and France in Suez, then?
Yes, I thought that was very mistaken action.
Do you think there are any conditions under which the Western nations would be justified in supplying military support to Middle Eastern countries?
No, I don't think so.
I'd like to ask you, Mr. Getty, about your ultimate objectives. What would you like to do in life, ever?
Well, that's a broad question. It's not so much what I'd like to do, but what I have to do.
Well, can't you just throw up your hands and go beachcombing for a while if you feel like it?
Well, I like to think that I'm quite a talented idler, but I don't have much time to prove my talent for it.
Are you ever tempted to throw your money around even a little bit once in a while? I mean, if you walk into a restaurant where the service is bad, are you ever tempted just to go in and buy the place?
No, that would be bad form and ridiculous. I think that would be very nouveau riche indeed.
Any idea what size of a fortune the Getty? Any idea what you'll be worth when you decide to retire?
No, I don't claim to be able to look into the future.
And do you have any further ideas about what you're going to do with that fortune?
Well, I hope to keep active in business.
Looking for more oil wells and finding a few?
Well, trying to keep the position in the industry that I have now, which is rather hard to do because there's a lot of very vigorous competition.
You have particular competition both in your oil companies and in your shipping interests, don't you?
Yes.
Heavy competition.
Yes.
Is Mr. Onassis one of your competitors?
No, he's not a competitor. He's a friend of mine. He's a tanker owner, of course.
Do you have social activities together?
Yes, we see each other socially.
Very curious to know what happens when you and Mr. Onassis go to lunch. Who picks up the check?
Well, we both reach for it.
And who reaches the fastest?
Well, Mr. Onassis is a very fast man in reaching for the check. I think he more than holds his own.